how do we actually practice this? Now, I'm going to talk about starting from scratch and organizing these inputs as practice kind of modules in just a moment. But first, I want to make a note about dummy settings, and that is, of course, that when you start, you want to practice with guard all on. It doesn't really matter how you're spacing your ghosts at first, at least not at that level of precision, as long as you're doing it and getting the muscle memory down. But once you start practicing with guard first to test your ghost string, you should also be on the lookout for something instructive about your high option. And it is going to be pretty unlikely that I will be able to do this on command because it's a mistake, but there's this weird no man's land where when you air dash JL, you're low enough that you can't JL2, so you get JL1. But you're too high to 5L at your normal timing, right? It's between the kind of full JL2 height and your actual mix height for JL1. And what's going to end up happening is that your 5L gets eaten, and it's like a very awkward scenario, which I actually was able to do there. So this is something that has happened to me, and you can see I was able to sort of like kind of adjust a little bit and get my 5L to come out because I could see it happening. But this is something that I promise will come up in a match, and it's a mistake that you can kind of iron out with practice. But it is a weirdness, and you don't want to be left there like holding the bag. So this is the actual, what I just did is the actual sort of mix height that you want, and everything should string kind of perfectly there. But I promise that you will probably, unless you're just like, a master out of the gate, you'll probably get that weird JL height. And, in my mind, getting JL2 is actually better, even though that's technically worse mix-wise, right? In a way. So, that aside, how do we practice this starting from scratch? And obviously, if you haven't done negative edging before, one thing you might want to do is just begin by holding S during the super flash and releasing it some number of times so that you can get a feel for kind of what that's like to come out of the super. Now, I've released S now. You can't tell based on my inputs, but what's going to happen is that you're going to see, as I just sort of did, what that earliest moment is that you can release a ghost, and what is too early. The worst thing you can do, I guess, is to release S and not have a ghost come out. That's even worse than allowing a bigger gap on wake up there because you have no real way to deploy the S besides the moon jump itself firing 2 ghosts at once, which is not the end of the world. But being able to release S on time is very, very important. Just note that if you do it too early, you're suddenly standing there not holding one of those 2 ghosts that are pivotal to the setup and all of that. Now, do practice that, but I would honestly recommend practicing your S release later. I would not worry about that too much at first, because you can just kind of do the ghosts, hold L and S, and stand here, and just think about the setup itself. Now, how do we actually kind of get from nothing to 3 ghosts stringing? I would consider it a movement that happens in 2 phases. The first one is, hold L and S again, just so you're doing the full setup. And on pad, I will note, people have told me this is, I believe, kind of like relatively straightforward because L and S are vertically aligned by default. So you would be putting your thumb straight down across L and S, and then lifting sort of the joint of your thumb to release S, and then maintaining pressure on L with more the tip of your thumb. So that should be a fairly easy motion to get down, based on my experience playing fighting games on pad, which was some time ago, but I did do some kind of like, straight down vertical stuff in Marvel 3, for example, bolt cancels. So all that aside, what I would do is recommend beginning just doing this and sort of getting used to this motion, and then considering release S dash as a single input. This is really how I would practice the setup. Just do release S dash and tap dash. That's the main thing you want to do. You want to tap dash so you make sure you're getting the dual ghost release. Don't think about this as ghost releases at first. Think of it as a single motion. Here are my fingers. One of them is pressing S. The other one is about to press a trigger. When I release S, I press down on that trigger, right? This is a single thing that your body is doing until you are far more advanced and you want to actually delay your H ghost, then you are basically always going to release H and S together, right? And not in that order, of course. You're going to release S then H together as a single motion. That is your default. That should be your default. And personally, when I do want to mess with reflect and I'm kind of, setting a trap, I bait with L, because to me, the sort of release S into H is just so ingrained, right? Now, that's what you should do a bunch of times. This is one motion. And then you're already like 2/3 of the way toward the setup. That's 2 out of 3 ghosts, right? Just keep doing that and don't even jump. Then don't worry about L. Instead of you doing L, right, just release S dash and then jump. That's all you got to do. Release S dash and then jump. Add the jump, right? One step at a time. Release S dash jump. Now that's one motion too. That's the actual, now you're sort of building toward the real kind of final stage, but your brain, now that it has release S dash down, should be able to add release S dash jump, and now you can do that a bunch of times and make that into a single physical unit in your muscle memory, right? This is something that just happens together. Release S dash jump happens together every time, and then you can add the fast fall after that, and then you keep working toward getting that initial movement down, right? Which again is just going to look like this, right? This every time, right? This is what you're doing. You can even practice without ghosts if you want, like the fast fall timing or something like this. If you kind of do like training start, you could probably hold L and S here, right? So you can just do it without ghosts, right? I'm holding L and S because I did it during training reset, and I can just release S and dash jump like that, right? And you can just do it over and over again. I'm doing it again, hold an S, right? You don't even need ghosts. You can just watch yourself dash jump. That's all you got to do. And the upshot of this is really, if I were to learn it, and everybody is kind of different, what I would be focusing on is disassociating from what's going on screen. I would not be thinking like, okay, I'm releasing 2 ghosts now, you know, what am I doing? I would be thinking I'm releasing S and dashing, right? I would be focused on my hands so that my brain didn't have to account for the negative edge stuff that's going on. It is, negative edging is weird to me even now. There are certain things like Ghoki, or not Ghoki, but the old ghost routes where you would do, you know, a combo extension with like super dash into M ghost into J2H into L ghost, or JH into L ghost, something like this. Anyway, I don't even remember. I literally don't remember the inputs because to me it's something spongy that happens all with my fingers, like on the keys. You know, it's just like it's weird. It's weird, right? So you don't have to worry about that too much. Just focus on the actual physical motion at this point and disassociate from what's going on screen. And that's, I think, going to help you quite a bit. And then you'll suddenly realize that you're releasing 2 ghosts. And releasing L ghost is not difficult. Releasing L ghost is simply a matter of, you know, somewhere where you're getting fairly close to them. You know, you're hovering around like this height, like around here. You're going to release L so that you can string into the mix. And obviously when you're fast falling, there's going to be some variable timing going on, but guard first is going to be your friend there. I would assume that if you have issues stringing your ghosts, it's going to be with your L release. And so, you know, focus on that later once you get the initial thing down. I don't know how many different ways I can say this same thing, so I'll kind of stop. But really, again, my recommendation when you're starting to practice is to consider held L and S as a single thing that's going on. Not held L and S. Release S dash as a single thing that's going on. Sorry, I was holding L and S as I said that. As a single thing that's going on, and then to just do that over and over and over again, right? Don't practice the mix. Don't worry about the mix. Don't worry about that at all. This is the actual input for the setup this is really where the execution barrier is, in my opinion. It's getting that start to it, right? And that start is very important, as I've said in other videos, because that's what, first of all, gets you out of the way if your opponent's like DPing or like doing something, right? It's what meaties them if they try a frame 4 option or some jank, right? It's really kind of doing the bulk of the work of the setup, and that L ghost is just there to bridge out of what you would really consider the actual Oki, like what's literally happening as they wake up, which is H into S. The L is just there to bridge into what Gotenks is doing with the mix. So if that's clear, I do hope it helps in some way. Everybody's different, so if you do want to practice the whole thing start to finish, you know, that's fine. And you know, if you're doing moon jumping, I'll just say the logic is the same, right? Practice it by doing, whoops, of course, my own setup I whiff, but practice it by doing, you know, release S moon jump and then add the fast fall, right? It's going to be the same thing. That is one single motion, right? Release S. And then it's just you're jumping here as part of the single motion instead of dashing along the ground. Does that make sense? Cool. So I don't have anything else to say about sort of practice methods, but I'm happy to look at, you know, clips. Like everybody in the Discord is happy to look at clips if you have questions about it. And, you know, if you kind of don't find, that something's working out, I'm sure we can figure it out and get you on the right track. Otherwise, it's not that bad. Again, just break it down into chunks. It's really going to be just fine.